Have you ever wondered why certain verses in Scripture seem to whisper secrets that others never hear? Why some men saw only danger, but David saw destiny? For 40 days, a valley trembled not from battle, but from silence. An entire army paralyzed by fear, staring at a single man of war. And yet, in the midst of that silence, one voice arose, a shepherd's voice that understood something ancient, something forbidden to the ordinary eye. They saw a giant. David saw an opportunity written in heaven. He didn't just see what stood before him, he perceived what others had forgotten, that revelation always comes disguised as confrontation. Hidden beneath this story is a code of divine knowledge, a pattern that shows how God trains the unseen, how faith rewires fear, and how courage is born not in battle, but in revelation. The Bible doesn't tell fairy tales. It hides truths meant for those who dare to look deeper. And the story of David is not about a boy defeating a giant. It's about a man who knew, who saw through fear, through armor, through impossibility, and acted on a secret God had already written into his heart. You've heard the legend, now you will uncover the revelation, because David knew something the world had forgotten, and you're about to know it too. The valley of Elah stretched wide like a wound across the land, dry soil cracking under the sun, air heavy with dread. On one ridge, the banners of Israel fluttered weakly in the wind, symbols of a nation trembling under the weight of its own disbelief. On the other, the Philistines stood tall, bronze armor glinting in the morning light, their war cries slicing through the silence like blades. For 40 days, the same voice rose from the enemy camp, deep, mocking, unrelenting. Goliath. His every word was a strike against the soul of Israel. Send me a man. He thundered morning and evening until even the birds fled from the sound. But none came. Not even Saul, the tall and chosen king, dared to move. The man anointed to lead was now hiding behind iron and fear. Faith had become memory, courage a rumor. The soldiers of Israel rehearsed their excuses under their breath, each one convincing himself that survival was wisdom. But deep within their trembling hearts, something darker was growing, the belief that perhaps God had left them. And then one morning, dust rose at the edge of the camp. It wasn't a soldier, it wasn't a messenger of war, it was a boy, carrying bread, not blades, a shepherd from Bethlehem named David. He came to deliver food, not prophecy, yet destiny was waiting for him in the dust. When David heard Goliath's taunts, he didn't just hear insults against men, he heard defiance against God. And something ancient, something holy, ignited inside him. When an army froze in fear, a shepherd saw an opportunity to glorify God. Where others saw size, David saw perspective. Goliath was not too big to fight, he was too big to miss. The valley was no longer just geography, it was revelation. It was the line between fear and faith, between those who knew about God and the one who knew God. For 40 days, the men of Israel had listened to the same words of intimidation. David would speak one word of faith that would silence them all. He asked, "Who is this uncircumcised Philistine that he should defy the armies of the living God?" In that question, history shifted. The curse of fear began to crack. The valley of Elah was not waiting for a warrior, it was waiting for a believer. And sometimes belief wears shepherd's clothes. Fear spreads fast, but revelation travels faster. As David's voice rose, it carried something unseen, a sound older than the battlefield, the sound of divine confidence. Heaven was stirring again over Israel. And in that stirring, one boy stepped forward while thousands stepped back. Because when faith awakens, destiny begins to move. And what began as a valley of fear was about to become the furnace of divine preparation. Before the clash of steel, there was silence. Before the roar of the crowd, there was the whisper of wind across empty hills. Before David ever faced a giant, he had already faced the wilderness. Far from the gaze of men beneath the open skies of Bethlehem, a young shepherd stood watch over trembling sheep. He was nameless in the world's eyes, but known in heaven's. When others were chasing fame, David was chasing lions. When others sought crowns, he sought the quiet presence of God. Each dawn began with the same routine, the bleating of sheep, the stillness of the desert, the smell of dew on the stones. But in that monotony, the Eternal was sculpting something divine, because every true warrior is forged in obscurity before he is revealed in victory. Then came the moments no one saw: the lion that crept in the dark, the bear that tore through the brush. David did not run. He chased, he fought, he prevailed, not because he was strong, but because he had learned the rhythm of faith under pressure. Great battles are never won on the field, that they are rehearsed in the solitude of obedience. Every roar of danger became a sermon, every scar a memory of God's deliverance. In those silent hills, David learned something Israel's army had forgotten: that faith grows stronger when no one applauds. When night fell, he lifted his harp beneath the stars. His fingers danced over the strings as his spirit communed with the Almighty. His songs weren't performances, they were warfare in melody. That's how he learned to silence fear, not with swords, but with worship. The wilderness became his furnace, and solitude his sacred mentor. Every ordinary moment was divine preparation, every trial a coded prophecy. And as he watched over sheep that could not protect themselves, he understood something greater: that leadership begins with protection, not pride. He would later guard a kingdom the same way he guarded his flock, fiercely, faithfully, without hesitation. The same hand that once held a harp would soon hold destiny. David didn't know when or how his moment would come, but he stayed ready. He kept his sling sharp, his spirit sharper. The tools of his trade, a staff, a sling, and 5 smooth stones, would soon become emblems of divine precision. Even the stones he chose were deliberate, as if guided by unseen wisdom. In Hebrew symbolism, 5 represents grace, and grace was about to slay a giant. But perhaps the most profound truth of David's hidden years was this: he learned that isolation is not absence, it is invitation. God hides those he intends to use until their silence becomes strength. So when David walked into the valley of Elah, he was not a boy entering battle for the first time, he was a man already proven in private. The world saw a shepherd, heaven saw a weapon. Preparation hidden from men is revelation seen by God. And now that hidden fire was ready to break into history. If you've ever felt invisible, overlooked, or forgotten, remember, so was David. And yet heaven was watching every step, every song, every stone, because sometimes God trains his champions in shadows to reveal them in the light. If this part speaks to you, pause for a moment, reflect on your own wilderness, those silent seasons that shaped you. Share a glimpse of what they taught you, not as confession, but as testimony. Someone somewhere might be standing in their own valley waiting to hear that faith still grows in silence. And as the echoes of David's preparation fade, the horizon begins to tremble because the voices of doubt are gathering. The next test will not come from beasts, but from men. Every divine calling faces 3 gates of resistance, 3 voices that rise before destiny breaks open. The first comes from those closest to you. David had barely spoken when his eldest brother Eliab turned and lashed out. "I know your pride," he sneered. "You came down only to watch the battle." The words cut deep, not because they were true, but because they came from blood. Eliab saw only immaturity. He couldn't see anointing. He had witnessed Samuel pour the oil on David's head, yet still saw only the boy who used to carry his sandals. But David didn't argue. He turned away. Some battles aren't worth a sword, they require silence. He understood that when God chooses you, even your family might not recognize the calling. Revelation often offends familiarity because those who watched you grow cannot imagine who you've become. Then came the second voice, the voice of authority. Saul, Israel's king, looked at David and saw only a boy. "You cannot go against him," Saul said, "for you are young, and he has been a warrior since youth." But David didn't respond with rebellion or arrogance. He spoke with remembrance. "The Lord who delivered me from the lion and the bear," he said calmly, "will deliver me from this Philistine." It wasn't confidence in himself, it was memory turned into faith. Because faith that forgets is fragile, but faith that remembers becomes unstoppable. Saul hesitated, then tried to cover David in his royal armor, bronze heavy, dazzling in the light. But the moment David put it on, he knew something was wrong. The weight wasn't protection, it was limitation. He removed it quietly. He would not face this battle pretending to be someone else. True anointing cannot wear borrowed armor. The third voice rose from the valley floor itself, the enemy's voice. Goliath stepped forward, his armor clanging like thunder, his laughter echoing through the hills. "Am I a dog," he spat, "that you come at me with sticks?" He cursed David by his gods, mocking the very name of Israel's Lord. But David's eyes didn't flinch. His words came like fire. "You come to me with sword, spear, and javelin, but I come to you in the name of the Lord of hosts, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have defied." In that instant, the spiritual atmosphere shifted. The laughter of Goliath collided with the authority of heaven. The boy who once sang to sheep now spoke as a prophet of war. Mockery is wind, but for the chosen, that wind becomes propulsion. Doubt is the final gate before destiny. Every voice of disbelief, whether from family kings or enemies, exists to test one truth. Will you still move forward when no one agrees? David walked through all three voices, untouched by approval, unshaken by ridicule. His faith was no longer quiet. It had become thunder. And as he descended into the valley of Elah, he wasn't walking toward danger. He was walking toward the fulfillment of prophecy. If you've ever been underestimated by family leaders or adversaries, this is your moment to stand with David. Share what gives you strength when doubt surrounds you. Let this space become a valley of courage, where faith answers every taunt and silence becomes testimony. Because beyond the gate of doubt, there waits a miracle of timing, a collision between faith and destiny. The valley was silent now, not the silence of peace, but of breath held between two worlds. On one side stood a boy, the smell of sheep still clinging to his tunic. On the other stood a monster of bronze and iron, towering over the earth like a living fortress. The air trembled as Goliath advanced, each step like thunder rolling through the dust. David walked forward slowly. No shield, no sword, no armor, only a sling, a pouch of stones, and a name, the name. He didn't look at the size of his enemy. He looked through it, past it, into the unseen realm where victory had already been written. Courage isn't the absence of fear, it's the refusal to let fear interpret reality. The Philistine laughed. The Israelites watched frozen. Heaven leaned close. David bent down by the stream, the same stream that had seen centuries of battles and tears. He chose 5 smooth stones, not jagged, not random, but shaped by time and water. Each one whispered of preparation. Each one bore the fingerprint of grace. He placed one stone in his sling, began to swing it in rhythm, not of desperation, but of worship. Because for David, the battlefield had always been a sanctuary. Today he declared, his voice carrying like thunder across the valley, "The Lord will deliver you into my hand." Then the sling released. The stone cut through the wind. A single heartbeat of faith became a weapon of divine precision. The air froze. The stone flew. The giant fell. The impact echoed like a breaking curse. Goliath's laughter stopped mid-breath. He stumbled once, then collapsed face first into the dust. The ground itself seemed to gasp. The symbol of fear had fallen, and where the earth trembled moments before, now heaven thundered approval. David ran forward, seized Goliath's own sword, massive, gleaming, impossible for most men to lift, and with one clean motion ended what fear had begun. The boy no one believed in now held the head of the enemy no one could defeat. Faith plus right timing equals a public miracle. Around him, Israel's soldiers shouted for the first time in 40 days. Their courage reignited, their silence shattered. It wasn't David's strength that saved them, it was revelation. Because faith doesn't wait for evidence, it creates it. And in that moment, the shepherd became a symbol, a living testament that one act of obedience can shift the destiny of a nation. The sun broke through the clouds, light spilling across the valley where giants once ruled. David stood still, his sling hanging loosely at his side, eyes lifted toward heaven. He didn't claim victory, he recognized it. Because the glory was never his, it never is for those who truly believe. When faith aligns with purpose, even a stone becomes the language of God. As the dust began to settle, the sound of the enemy retreating filled the air. The battle was over, but something deeper had begun. The world saw a victory of arms, heaven saw the revelation of faith. And beyond the echo of that day, a greater truth was awakening. The same God who felled a giant with a shepherd's sling still trains hearts to stand against impossible odds. The story of David is not a relic of ancient warfare, it is a mirror that reflects every age, every nation, every believer standing in their own valley of Elah. Because Goliath never truly died, he simply changed shape. He appears now as fear, as injustice, as compromise, as doubt. And still, God calls ordinary people to face him, not with armor, but with faith. Every generation has its battlefield. For some, it's the silent war of integrity in a world that worships deceit. For others, it's the weight of despair when hope seems distant. But the same principle remains. Victory belongs not to the strongest body, but to the steadfast heart. David's sling still swings not in the hands of one man, but in every act of courage that refuses to bow to fear. Prayer is still a weapon. Truth is still a stone. Obedience is still a sling. Faith isn't a moment of bravery. It's a rhythm of trust lived one decision at a time. True faith doesn't shout for attention. It endures in silence. It's choosing honesty when lies seem easier. It's forgiving when revenge feels deserved. It's standing for justice when standing alone feels unbearable. That is the modern battlefield, not a field of dust and armor, but of choices and conscience. And just like David, every believer carries 5 stones, grace disguised as daily disciplines, prayer that aligns the heart, truth that pierces deception, courage that confronts fear, humility that silences pride, and obedience that completes faith. Each one small in appearance, eternal in power. Everyone has a Goliath, but also the stones God already placed in your hand. We were never meant to fear giants. We were meant to reveal God through them, because the same God who guided a shepherd's aim now guides your purpose. Every struggle, every setback, every season of waiting, they are not punishment, they are preparation. The valley you dread today may be the very ground where your greatest revelation will emerge. So don't run from it, walk through it. Carry your sling of faith and know that heaven still measures courage, not by size, but by surrender. When you win, stay humble, for victory is borrowed, not owned. When you fall, stay faithful, for failure is only fatal when you stop believing. Because in God's design, even defeat is instruction. Faith doesn't guarantee ease, it guarantees endurance. And that is the secret. David knew fear is loud, but revelation is louder. When faith moves in divine rhythm, even giants must obey. David's story wasn't just about one battle. It was the announcement of a pattern that God partners with the willing to expose the impossible. The valley that once echoed with terror now resounds with testimony. And perhaps your valley, your struggle, your waiting, your test is next in line to do the same. Because what David knew still speaks today. The name that silenced Goliath still reigns, and every heart that believes becomes a battlefield of victory. The war may look different now, but the revelation remains the same.